Thanks, Dr. Doyen and Sages. This is an incredible panel, and I really appreciate. Let's just give a little round of applause for these guys. I'm like blown away by their talks. So I think this is an extremely timely, almost ahead of its time session, especially in light of the fact that the surgical workforce in the next 10 years is going to be decreasing by 17%. So I think this is just the tip of the iceberg, and that these problems are going to need to be answered because it's only going to continue. And I actually had a moment of panic when I'm like, wait, I'm giving the innovation talk about in a rural panel. How am I qualified? And then I realized, oh yeah, I am a rural surgeon. Woo! So I work at the flagship hospital in Morgantown, West Virginia, at West Virginia University, in an extremely rural state. So I think in a way I probably represent the bridge between the severe rural and then the severe academic. So I think the message I want you to take away from my talk is that, innovation can occur in rural areas. And I think for everyone out there in a rural practice, you are the people who have the tools to articulate the problem, and then let's start building a solution. And I think there are a lot of tools out there that we can develop to improve kind of rural surgery. Let's see. So here are my disclosures. I am gonna wait the full 7 seconds. Because of my disclosures, I actually cannot share, the company-based stuff I am doing, but you can be a rural surgeon and actually do it. So I'm going to be kind of providing a really broad overview to the surgical innovation process. We're going to talk about what it is, why it's important, the concept of a physician innovator, and then briefly touch on intellectual property and invention disclosures. So again, background, I think human beings are inherently creative. Invention is when you create a new idea or a concept. And what's the difference between invention and innovation? Innovation is when you take this new idea and either bring it to a larger audience in terms of commercial success or widespread use. So I would think of like the Seldinger technique. Someone invented that and now everybody uses it. So that would be innovation. So traditionally, innovation has been in these categories, the 3Ds, so diagnostics, drugs, devices. It also expanded into things around quality improvement and cost containment. And now modern innovation, here's some areas that are really just blowing up, I would say, since COVID even. So telehealth, apps, smart devices, robotic surgery, and then big data products. And even just during this panel, I'm thinking telehealth, there's a huge role for connecting rural surgeons through a unified app or communication process. So even telementoring, telesurgery, better surgical mentors, this is all right around the corner for all of us. Smart devices, I'm thinking remote patient monitoring for the patients that want to stay at home during their recovery. There's a role for better tools for patients going home and then us monitoring them there. So again, just some background. Innovation, at least within academia, is huge. So in 2018, $70 billion, put into research expenditures, 17,000 patents filed. Of those, 7,000 patents issued, and 800 new products created, and 1,000 startups formed. And so this was 4 years ago. I bet it's doubled since then. This is just the overview slide of how can you translate an idea into reality. On the left, you have your idea, you're protecting your intellectual property. The middle is the early development, where we say what's the value of this idea and then how to move it forward. Usually that's going to be through licensing, getting some seed funding, proving your proof of concept, and finally commercialization, where this is sort of the big stuff where you're going to be trying to operationalize this idea. And again, we're really only talking about the idea at this point. So what are some reasons that physicians are excellent innovators? So number one, I think we're all very dedicated to taking care of people and helping people get healthy. There's always a lifelong learning mentality. We're immersed in medicine, especially a rural surgeon who is on call all the time, right? And so you can see the problems and identify the solutions. Now, what are some reasons physicians are bad innovators? Well, burnout, right? So 40% of the people sitting here in this room are burnt out, just based on the statistics. Rural surgeons are getting burnout, so it's hard to innovate when you're burnt out. And then systemic barriers, again, not a lot of training in place for people to understand the innovation process. It is a process, something that everyone can learn, but we don't get training in medical school or usually subsequently. It's very hard, this early stage funding, when you have an idea, how to kind of just get something that shows how it works. And then again, this dance we do with industry, again, I think I agree with everything in the earlier talks about engaging with industry. The question is, do we lead or do we follow? And I think there's a huge role for surgeons leading more rather than always letting the industry follow how the dialogue has to go. So again, traditional academia, normally there's the trifecta, so clinical work, education, and then research. But, people have started to say, hey, we need another pathway. We need a clinician innovator role. You could swap out maybe one of those other things, not your clinical, of course, to be an innovator instead of maybe an educator. The idea is for physicians interested in the intersection of healthcare technology and just healthcare delivery to develop themselves as clinician innovators. And so number one, for people who are heads of programs, it's really important to start carving out space in your training to give trainees these tools. Again, Stanford Biodesign has been around over 20 years now. They are probably the best kind of innovation program in the country, but there's also a new College of Medicine in Illinois. It's the first medical school that will have a focus on the intersection of engineering and medicine. So I'm just giving an example of one of our local innovators in West Virginia. Dr. McClellan is a plastic surgery who went to WVU Medical School. He then did residency at the Leahy Hospital, and then a hand microsurgery fellowship at Duke. He has a private practice across the street from WVU. He also did his aesthetic fellowship. So these are the things he's developed just in his career. So this is a special breast implant that allows you not only to inject or a breast spacer to change kind of the size, but also if a seroma occurs, there's a drain built in so you can evacuate the seroma. For people who have cut their fingers off, usually it's hard, to find a prosthetic that fits. This is a little fingy, so, developing custom fingertips for people with those injuries. This is a training module he developed for orthopedic residents learning how to do pinning. And let's watch this video. How do I get the video to play? Okay. So what we're seeing is a training session where I'm not an orthopedic surgeon. Looks like they break the bones and then they pin them into place and take an x-ray. But this is great, again, because again, with the work hour restrictions, with so many limitations in training, we need more of these type of tools for our residents, but in general surgery. Okay, good. So, that's an example of what someone in West Virginia has done for innovation in a rural setting. Now, what is intellectual property? Again, this is just creations of the mind. So, it can be things that can be patented, trademarked, copyrighted. I wanted anyone who's interested in innovation should know, whether you're at an academic place or somewhere else, of, your employer's intellectual property policy. And so what you can see is most of them look like this. So you had this idea, or you invented something. Was it within the scope of your university employment? So if I'm a surgeon and I probably invent anything within the general surgery or bariatric realm, even if it's after hours, maybe it's probably within the scope of my employment, yes. But if it wasn't, did I use a lot of university resources for it? If that's a yes, then the university owns it, you have to disclose it. Again, if the answers are no to all those things, then you own the invention. But I would encourage everyone who wants to innovate, just figure out what your IP policy is in your contract. So, let's say you have an idea, it is within the scope of your rural practice because you're a rural surgeon, you have a tool to improve communication for rural surgeons. Probably need to disclose it. You fill out a form, it's basically what your idea is, why it's important. You may give it to your Office of Technology Transfer. Usually they will do a prior art search and then a commercialization assessment. At my institution, the prior art is done by an intern in that office, so you can also look at prior art through Google Patents, that sort of thing on your own and probably come to a similar search. And then the commercialization assessment is usually sent out to a firm that specifically does that thing. They look at the idea, they say, what is the market size, what is the need, is this something that should be patented by OTT? If those searches are favorable, the commercialization assessment vendor will say, yeah, this has good commercialization potential, and then usually the university will then move forward with a patent. There's two main types of patents. The first one is called a provisional patent. Really, this is just a stake in the ground. And the way it works is, let's say you have this idea for improving rural surgery. You put in the provisional patent. That gives you 1 year to, and the filing fee for this can be as inexpensive as $140. You can do it yourself. But this will give you a year to flush out that idea to determine if it's valuable. If it is, within that year, you can then convert it and file a non-provisional patent. That's also called a utility patent. If those are granted, those are, 20 years that they protect your idea. Again, those are more costly to file. And we talked about that. And, finally, just my last slide in the innovation process before we wrap it up is, let's say you get your patent. The next step would be to license it. What does it mean to license a technology? That usually means obtaining a permission from the organization to develop and commercialize that idea. So for example, let's say we have a rural surgery patent. We filed it, WVU filed the patent, then, usually they need to license it back to you, or you would find another company to license it to then commercialize it. And usually if you get a license, you pay a royalty fee and an annual fee. So just wrapping up, I think if you take anything away from this, I would say there's a huge demand for more innovation in the rural surgery space. So things to do and not do: if you have an idea, do not come up to the SAGES podium and publicly disclose it. The minute you disclose an idea in public, even though this is not fully public, it is no longer patentable. So if you have a great idea, don't blurt it out at the SAGES podium. Put down a little provisional patent before you do that. I would say also very important moving through the innovation process is just getting comfortable working as a team. Surgeons have medical expertise and clinical expertise, but usually to be a successful innovator, you have to be able to work as a good team player with an engineer, a lawyer, a business person. And it's sort of like being in a band. You gotta all work together. And for people who are interested in innovation, again, be curious, pay attention to the inefficiencies or things you see in your workflow that could be improved. Ask yourself what problems are you having and is there a way to solve them? And then, is there something you see in your day-to-day you could do to make your job better or easier, to improve patient care in your area, to make a safer surgery? And I would actually say one benefit of innovation in rural states is all the overhead fees, the patent fees, all these things are a lot lower. So to innovate in California, unfortunately, with, the UC system, all those, it's probably more expensive to innovate in California, but for people in these rural areas, the cost of hiring your engineering firm, hiring your lawyer, all these things are so much more affordable. So I think there's real room for the rural and the more out there areas to produce some innovation. That's all.
That's great.